Harvey Wigner, who recently practiced this talk before a group of enthralled second graders. Speak to us about
Kindergartens.
They are, Joel.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
This is a menorah with candles in it, and I'll explain what the meaning of the candles are as I go through my little introduction. And I'll take them in the box. Yes. I'll get out a dreidel. So we know what a dreidel is?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So the story of Hanukkah goes like this. It's over 2,000 years old. After Alexander conquered the world, he died. His generals divided the kingdom into 3 parts. One of the parts had the Middle East. And the general named Ahasuerus wanted people, it thought it would be easier to manage the people if everybody was holiness. Everybody worshipped the way the Greeks did. So, that meant he took the temple, which is the center of Judaism. He looted the golden artifacts. And he put in idols, Roman gods, which the Jews were idols. You can guess the Jews weren't happy about this. No. And they fought to free the temple and eventually free Israel. And they were successful. So until the Romans came, Judah was a free state. Israel was a free state. When they got to the temple, they noticed that the eternal light was not lit. And the eternal light didn't light with electricity. It was oil. And they wanted to keep it going. But they couldn't find enough oil. It took 8 days to make the oil. And they only had 1 day's work. So they poured the oil in, and guess what? It lasted for how long?
8 days.
All right. So, that's the story. How many of you think it's 100% true? No. But we'll go into that. Because this is a menorah. This is another menorah. And it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 candles. 8 candles. Today is the 6th day of Hanukkah. The 7th day will start at sundown. I was going for the 7th, I lost the translation. So, who knows the bracha? The blessing over the candles. Bracha. You can say it with me. Bracha. Atah. Anu. Merach. A share. Yusharu. Mitzvah. Mitzvah. Nefach Meir. Shall. Hanukkah. What do you like to think of? This is why Hanukkah is called the Festival of Lights. No fire. Fire. You tear down the meeting house.
The quickest are watching this, they're like,
no. Don't kill that. So, in truth, The story about the miracle of the 8 days was invented many years later by rabbis. In truth, a lot of the Jews wanted to be better. So it was part of the Civil War as well as a great military victory. What we know is the winners like this. This is a great one. It's a gambling game. If you get a million, you get none of the money in the pot. If you get a gimel, you get it all. Gimel means giving. If you get a hay, you get half the pot. And then, hey, you get half the pot. You shouldn't get. No, she pudding free. Anyway, why it's hot? When they weren't permitted to practice the religion, they would do it in secret, and if the cops came, they bed them down. The letters that have taught me a great miracle happened here in 2 ways. That's it.
Hey, Sandy. Sandy, can you look at this film, please? Hey. Hey.
As with Hanukkah,
I know, Fritz, I know.
Yeah, I'm gonna have the kids come with me. I know, I'm kind of on the but any kids that want to join me with doing a mythology lesson or Harry Potter and Yu-Gi-Oh! So, come on, Ashley.
Go down, please. May the spirit of love surround everywhere, everywhere you may go.
as with Hanukkah, we Christians have also embellished many stories. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You folks are hardcore Unitarians. 9 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. It's so good to be back here. And I have always liked your intimate setting for the worship service. I will talk about my struggles with the Lutheran Church maybe after the service, for those who are interested, because I'm sure everyone's not interested in what's going on in regards to that. And I would rather spend this time telling you a story about a mother and child. And above all, it's a story about love. A young man in his early years was adopted, wanted to discover who his biological parents were. Most of us here know who our parents are, and it's sometimes difficult for us to understand what it's like not to know who our parents are. The year was 1969. There was an 18-year-old girl living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She was dating a black man. This teenager became pregnant. This was not good. Her parents were German Lutherans, and an out-of-wedlock pregnancy, especially to a black man, was unacceptable. This young lady carried the baby to full term. The baby was born in March of 1970, 51 years ago. And this child had to be put up for adoption for the young girl and her parents. There was no other option. But she was concerned about what kind of a home would he be placed in. Would he be placed in a white home? Would he be placed in a black home? The social worker simply told her he would be placed in a good home. 6 weeks later, Judy and I adopted this boy and named him Eric. He became the 5th of our children. They have one other adopted son. His name is Mike, and he's a Native American Sioux Indian. And we always encourage our boys to find their roots. So Eric, in his early 20s, he began to search to find his parents. He was very unsuccessful in his own attempt, so he decided to hire a searcher, someone who knew how to find parents. Her name was Carolyn. Carolyn located Eric's mother. She lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Years after Carol had this baby, Eric, she married an older man. His name was Jim. He was 20 years older. Now, for Eric to meet with his biological mother, Carol, there had to be an intermediary to see that both people wanted to have contact. So a social worker by the name of Mary was given that task. And she tried to call Carol in Milwaukee, but her number was not accurate. So she called Eric's grandparents, or Carol's parents. The grandparents hung up on Mary. Mary then went to Carol and Jim's home in Milwaukee. They would not let her in. The social worker was fearful of making any more contacts because she was afraid she would be charged with harassment. So she called Eric, who lived in Pittsburgh, and told her what had happened. Eric told me that he went to a nearby park, fell on the ground and cried, but he could not cry. This was his second rejection, birth denial. This deeply troubled me because somehow I knew that this was not Carol's decision not to have contact with his son. At the time, I was living in Boca, Pennsylvania. A few years later, in the year 2000, I decided to go to Milwaukee and ask Carol if this really was her decision and not someone else's. This was her only child. And I thought, somehow I was convinced she wanted to have contact with her son. Now, my friends and relatives did not think this was a very good idea on my part. They thought that she had detached herself emotionally from this birth experience and that I should respect her privacy. Well, I thought that might be true, but it's really hard to believe because I felt like I knew her. I know Eric. I know what a sensitive person he is. I knew he could have never simply removed something like that from his emotional makeup. I had put together a letter about Eric, and I addressed it to Carol. I told her in the letter how Eric had a lead in the school play. I told her how he played the trumpet in the marching band. I told her how he was on the cross-country team. I told her how he was a foreign exchange student, went to Argentina. I told her how he spoke Spanish fluently. I told her that he was attending the University of Pittsburgh. And I was so proud of him. I wanted to share his success with her. I also included a picture with this letter. And I said that Eric very much wanted to have a relationship with her. I put all this information in a large envelope. I was going to deliver it to him. I got on my motorcycle. I rode from Boca, Pennsylvania to Milwaukee, Wisconsin with my envelope. I parked my motorcycle about a block down the street. I went to the door and knocked. Jim, Carol's husband, opened the door. He did not invite me in. He stepped outside and he said to me, what are you doing here? What do you want? He said, I would like to speak to you. Jim then said, what do you want to speak to her about? I said, well, it's personal and I'd like to share it with her. Somehow he had like ESP. He said, I think I know what this is about. He said, we said it years ago. We were not going to have anything to do with this. She signed the papers, and that was to be the end of it. I said, I traveled from Pennsylvania. I'd like to at least speak with Carol. He said, I don't care how far you travel. You are not going to see her. He was getting more and more angry and more threatening. I walked away, still holding the undying. What to do now? The searcher had also found the address of Carol's parents, Eric's grandparents. I got on my motorcycle and I rode to their place. I knocked on the door and I said, I'm a Lutheran. Well, they were good Lutherans. I knocked on the door and said, I'm a Lutheran pastor. And I'd like to visit with you. Well, they welcomed me in like good Lutherans, and we started talking. But as soon as they discovered who I was and what I wanted to talk about, they became very nervous and anxious. Very agitated, and they said, this is a big secret. We cannot talk about it. Well, I could see that they were getting very nervous. And then I said, what if Eric came to the door to speak with you? He said, well, we could not let him in. I said, what did Eric ever do? He deserved to be treated like this. But he had no response. I could tell they were getting very upset. They were elderly, and I left. And as I left, I put the envelope on. I continued to believe that Carol was not the one who decided not to see her son. On Eric's birthday, I would think of her. And I would wonder, what's going through her mind about her son? But I didn't know what more I could do. I thought my only chance of ever getting an honest answer from her is if her husband passed away. Only then will I get an honest response from her. She said to me, Fritz, I don't want to see Eric. I would respect her wishes and dropped it. Years went by. And then one summer, I watched the movie Philomena. Has anyone seen that movie? A number of you have. I also read the book Orphan Train. That movie and that book rekindled this thing with inside of me, and I said, I gotta pursue this. I cannot just let this go. Well, by now, Eric had become a doctor of Oriental medicine. He had spent time in China studying for this degree, and he had his own private practice in Greenville, South Carolina. I thought, maybe Carol's husband has passed. And I made a response that was truly Carol's. Now, this was 14 years later. I decided I would not do this unless Eric supported my mission. I looked in my files and I could not find the one about this biological mother. I then realized when I sold that home and moved to Florida, I had given all of this information to Eric. I sent Eric an email and I asked him if he knew where this information about his mother was. And I was using that as kind of a test to see if he really was interested in me doing this. Well, he quickly responded and he said he did have the information. Once again, my friends and relatives said, Fritz, bad idea. Don't try that. Now, if Eric did not respond positively, I would not do it because he's the one who truly suffers. He's the one who goes through the pain of rejection when these trips are failures. But he responded positively. So I traveled to his home in South Carolina to visit Eric and talk more about my venture. When I arrived, we had dinner, got on our computers trying to locate Eric. He was actively helping me on the computers. So once again, I took this as a sign of support. He was willing to go through this again. We found her. She now lived in Cedarburg, Wisconsin, outside of Milwaukee. Her husband was still alive. The next day, I headed for Milwaukee. On the way, I emailed my brothers and sisters and told them that we do this again. My younger brother, he suggested I change my strategy. Last time, try something different. So while I'm riding to Chicago, I dwelled on this and thought, what else can I do? Then I remembered, well, there are Lutherans. Maybe I could go to one of the Lutheran churches in Cedarburg and share with the pastors my story. They might go with me on the visit and at least give me a better chance of getting in the door. Well, I arrived in Cedarburg on Friday the 13th. I went to 4 different Lutheran churches that morning. I shared my story with each of the pastors. And the pastors knew the apartment complex where Carol lived. They knew I was a complete stranger to Cedarburg from Florida. But not one of them wanted to be a part of this visit. It was now around noon. I went to the local McDonald's, and my stomach was such a mess, I couldn't eat anything. I sat there thinking, what can I possibly do? How can I avoid another painful failure? I could not come up with anything other than go there, knock on the door, see what happens. I knew Eric was waiting in North Carolina to hear about my visit. I arrived at the upscale apartment complex, and right away I noticed it was a very secure building. No way to get in, other than being buzzed. I went into the entryway. I saw all the apartments listed, and I saw Carol's name there. And I didn't know what I was going to do, because if I buzzed her apartment, she wouldn't let me in. But I couldn't think of any other choice that I had. So I said, well, I'm going to hit that buzzer and just go with whatever happens. The buzzer, buzz, hit it again, buzz, hit it again, buzz, no response. Now I really didn't know what to do. Here, I was not being rejected by a person, I was being rejected by an empty apartment. I again stood there for a few minutes. And with no ideas, I went down to the little patio outside the apartment building and sat there on a chair for probably 15 minutes. I head back to Florida. I tell Eric once again, nothing happens. Then something very strange happened. I saw an elderly lady being let out of the car at the curb. She was probably in her 80s. And she starts walking up the sidewalk. I said, hello. She responded. I said, can I ask you a question? She said, well, yes. I asked her if she knew Carol. She said, yeah. I said, I'm from Florida. I'd like to visit Carol. I said, I don't know if she's on vacation or whether she's on the weekend, but as for a time, there was no response. This woman then looked out over the parking lot and said, their car's not here, but they will be back soon. Then she said an even more amazing thing. She said, would you like to come in and have a bowl of chicken soup while you're waiting? This lady, a single lady in her 80s, was inviting a total stranger into her apartment. I said, I'd be happy to have some soup. Now I had found my way into this secure apartment. Had a bowl of soup, crackers, and drink. And I was feeling very guilty about being let into this building without telling her why I was doing it. I slowly began to tell Carol my eldest. It was not easy, and I didn't know quite how to do it, because I felt I was violating a very private confidence. But I finally struggled to say, Carol is the mother of my adopted son. I told her the whole story about Eric and my previous visits. Carol lived in Milwaukee. Her name, did I tell you her name also is Carol? How many Carols do they have in Cedar? She said, yes, it would have been very difficult back then. She listened attentively, and she shared stories about her own family. Now, all of us have stories in our families. So we were having a good give and take conversation about our families. And after about half an hour, I then asked her if she would check and see if Carol and Jim come back. She went to the window, looked out over the parking lot, and returned saying, "We are now home." She then said, "No one will ever know I knew you." I left her apartment. She said, "I will be praying for you." I went down the floor and stood in front of Carol's door. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I knew whatever it was, it had to have an impact because my time would be very short. Because when I knocked on the door, she would think it was one of her neighbors because she hadn't buzzed anybody. I knocked on the door. She opened the door, and my first words to her were, "Eric desperately wants to know you." She put her hands over her face and fell back to the side of the door like she'd been hit with something. I then added a second sentence. I said, "Don't you think Eric has a right to know who his father is?" Once again, on her face like she'd been hit. She's the only one who knew who Eric's father was. And if she didn't want a relationship with him, maybe his father. Nothing on the birth certificate about whose father was. Well, you can guess what happened then. Jim is in the living room. Jim comes charging out to the kitchen. He he said, "Are you from Pennsylvania?" He was very angry. I said, "No, I'm not from Florida." He then said, "When I saw that motorcycle out there, I should have known that was you." He continued telling me how I had no right to be there. I was intruding on their privacy. I kept pleading with him, "Just let me come in for a few minutes. What harm can that?" Well, believe it or not, he finally let me come in and be a part of it. He goes over and sits down in the big lounger. I sit on the couch. Carol, who hadn't said a word, sat across from me. Jim continued to rant how disrespectful the social workers were, and how no one was respecting them. Well, I suspect the social workers did have trouble relating to him because of his attitude. Jim continued to talk about how angry he was in this whole situation. No one was respecting their feelings. At this point, Carol stood up and said, "Would you like to have a cup of hot tea?" I couldn't believe it. I was now being encouraged to stay. She wanted me to feel welcome. Jim continued his anger about everything while she prepared the tea. She got the TV tray that was beside Jim's lounge and brought it over and put it beside the couch where I was. She put the tea, cookie, and I just couldn't believe it. But she still hadn't said a word other than, "You want to have some tea." I continued listening, making very few comments as Jim went on and on. Now, this was an all-white community. All the time I was in Seabrook, I never saw someone of a minority population. He said, the neighbors who were gossiping, if they knew Carol had a child, it would be very difficult. I asked him why he was doing all the talking. He wasn't saying anything. He said, "People say I am controlling, but I need to protect her. I need to protect her from the pain this might cause her. She cannot stand up for herself. She needs to be protected." I then turned to Carol and ignored Jim and said, "If Eric would write you a letter, would you respond to it?" She doesn't say a word, but she looks at Jim. I knew then that even if I talked with Carol all afternoon, it would not do any good. Jim was the one who could give her permission. In my view, Jim was like a substitute father who had saved her from a very uncomfortable situation years ago. Jim was in charge of her life. Jim worked in the power company. Carol worked in the office. Jim had been divorced with 4 children. Carol wanted to have a family, but Jim didn't want any more kids. And so Carol sacrificed not having a family in order to be married to Jim. This is what I wanted to say, but I didn't. I wanted to say, you've got 4 kids. You can see them anytime you want. I have 5 kids. I can see them anytime I want. Carol has 1 child. She's not allowed to have contact with that child. How fair is that? I didn't say that, because I knew it would not do any good. So he went on and on about the struggles in his life. I sat and listened. I felt fortunate to still be in the apartment. And so I was more than happy to listen to his saying. Finally, he said, "You are not like your other social workers." Well, I'm sure he irritated them by his controlling attitude. He went on to say, "Carol is the best thing that ever happened to me." Jim was in 82, she was 62. He said, we've never had an argument. It's all talking. At this point, Carol still had not said anything other than a cup of tea. I turned to Carol and asked if I could show her a video of Eric's home. His nice backyard, swimming pool. Carol did not respond. She began with Jim. Jim says, he's going to show you a few pieces of silver, and then you will want the gold. Jim believed I would seduce her by showing her things about Eric. Jim talked about adopted kids finding their parents and suing them, disrupting their lives. He had fears of Eric coming into their lives and perhaps seeking money from them or other ways of causing problems. I told him how successful Eric was. I said, you don't need to fear him taking anything from you. I told him, Carol has two brothers, no other family, and in her later years, Eric would help perhaps take care of her. I suspected Jim was jealous and feared Eric might interfere and take time away from his being his wife. I then began to share more about myself. I told him about my being divorced. And I talked about some of the other not so pleasant experiences in my life. Jim slowly began to see me as not his perfect pastor with his perfect plan. He began to see me as kind of more like him. He began to feel less threatened by me and my Eric. Even though his attitude was slowly changing toward me, I still had nothing to take back to him. And my attitude toward him was slowly changing. I began to see his good qualities. I kind of put myself in his generation. And the attitudes that he grew up with. Jim also spoke well of other races. Said he had good friends who were black. There was a real turning point in our visit when I said to Jim, I can tell from talking with you that you have a good heart. You can't easily be talking with me. You could just as easily be having the same conversation with me. At this point, Carol gets up and leaves the room. She was gone for at least half an hour. I had no idea why she left and what she was doing. Jim and I continued talking. At one point, Jim stops and says, she's in the other room. Jim continued to talk about how sensitive Carol is. I said, Eric's the same way. He's very sensitive. I will share that with her when she comes back in the room. Later, Carol came back in the room and said, still had barely spoken a word. I turned to Carol and I said, I can tell Eric every day that I love him. It's not the same as when you tell Eric you love him. Eric wants to know you are not ashamed of him. Eric wants to know he's not flawed in some way that you don't want to have any contact with him. She looked at me and said what literally blew me away. She said, I think of him every day, especially on his birthday, March 24th. She went on to say, I fight constantly not to reopen his letters. He had sent her 2 letters when he found out where she lived. She never responded. And this is the only physical evidence, it's the only physical thing she has of evidence. And so that's the only thing she could touch. I could not believe that I was hearing. My belief about her was confirmed. She cared and cared deeply about it. This, my wife does this to me. This may have been the first time her husband ever heard her say those words. She may have been in the other room, trying to gain the strength to say these words. I told her how sensitive Eric is. As a child, he can be reprimanded more than once. The least criticism and tears are streaming down his cheeks. I told her Eric loves to salsa dance and Carol commented how much she loves to dance. I told her Eric does Tai Chi weekly, and she says, I know all about Tai Chi and I would love to do Tai Chi. Now, how could that possibly be? Jim stood up and said to his wife something else I found almost unbelievable. He said, you can have whatever relationship you want with her. I embarrassingly became unable to speak. Tears on my face. Jim gets up, brings open his handkerchief. I felt I was experiencing a real life miracle. An honest to goodness miracle. A miracle is not when someone comes back from the dead. A miracle is not when someone walks on water. A miracle is when a heart is touched. A miracle is when a heart is changed. I had now become Jim's friend. He indeed was the gatekeeper, determining what relationship Carol would have with her son. He justified his control by convincing himself that he was doing what was best for Carol. I asked Carol if I could show her a picture of her. She came over, sat down next to me on the couch, and I showed her a picture of Eric in his office that I'd just taken in the last visit there. She said, he's so handsome. She also asked about his physical health. And I said, he's in great shape, and he works out and eats all the right stuff. In fact, when I go there, I have to go to a local grocery store to find something I recognize so I can eat. Now Carol was able to talk. She said her best friend in high school was Monica. Monica had a black boyfriend. Monica's black boyfriend had a brother. Monica introduced his brother to Carol. They began dating, and the troubling story began. Jim continued to surprise me by apologizing to me for the way he treated me in the previous visit. He showed me his artwork. He's an artist. He also does leather craft. And he makes letter openers. He showed me all of his letter openers and said, please take one of those. So I took one and I said, Eric will have this when I'm no longer around. I had been there for 3 or 4 hours. It was now about 5 o'clock. And I knew I had to leave, but I wanted to stay. They let me take their picture and they looked very happy. We all hugged, and then I left. I went up a floor to the apartment of the lady that had let me in. I knocked on the door and answered. She must have been napping and had left. I wanted to let her know that her prayers had been answered. I went back to McDonald's, called Eric, told him about my visit. Eric now had tears of joy and not tears of sorrow. Now, Carol and Eric could begin to heal. In the email, Eric thanked me and said he could have never done that on his own because of the past history. 2 days later, I wrote Carol and Jim a letter and thanking them for letting me visit with them. I hope that someday I would see them again. Eric was then excited about this whole new thing happening in his life, but unsure. How do you get to know someone after 44 years? I had no idea what was going on in Carol's mind. The relationship slowly evolved. Letters were sent, letters were opened, phone calls were made. Jim and Carol visited Eric at his home, and he continues to have regular contact with her. So, what does all this mean? Well, for one thing, it's so easy to fall into the trap of rationalizing what we are doing for someone else is actually what we're doing for ourselves. And something else. Jim thought he was protecting Carol. And then, what price do you pay for secrets? Can you imagine what it was like all these years living in Cedarburg, wondering when this day or Fritz going to show up and not come out? Most importantly, what this tells me is about the unbelievable bond of love between a mother and child occurs during those 9 months, and it never goes away. As I rode the interstate from Milwaukee toward Chicago, it was a cold, rainy day. This heavy motorcycle was loaded down with all my camping gear, but I felt as though I were on a cloud. I thought, if I get hit by a truck, that's okay. I had never had a goal I strove for so long and felt such exhilaration when the goal was finally accomplished. Who knows what the next chapters will bring? The door now swings both ways. I then had a picture of Carol and a letter opener to ship with Eric. I told this story to our fellowship in Florida. And 2 weeks later, our choir director came up to me and said, "I believe this," he said. "I was adopted when I was 2 years old. And I wasn't wanting to search for my parents, but I was afraid I would put my adopted parents at peace." Well, this story motivated her to go on a search. She found another family. In fact, she has relatives in Europe who are famous musicians. That's where she got her musical talent. I believe the lady sharing this story will encourage other people to not be so afraid. But it's a very controversial idea. Let me know how these things work. And so now, may the Divine Spirit in me bless you. I ask the Divine Spirit in you bless this day.
I'm not sure I can talk that story. Goodbye, precious mama. Say your prayers for me. Take me down the road now. Set your child free. I can't look behind me. The wheels have got to roll. Where these wheels are turning now, I don't really know. Save your love. Keep it burning long, I'll keep it burning strong. Hold it tight, Mom, hold on to that line. such a helpless wonder, such a mystery, such a price to sing this song. What comes over me? One thing I can tell you, as sure as rivers run, love I feel for you will never come undone. Save your love, keep it burning strong, I'll keep it burning long. All in time, Mama, hold on to that line. Goodbye, precious Mama. Say your prayers for me. Head me down the road now. Set your child free. Head me down the road now. Set your child free.
Thank you, Fritz. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Mike. Your words and your music, it's been a splendid afternoon. This fellowship is important to us all. Contributions we make today allow us to sustain and grow our congregation and to reach out to the community, both nearby and in the larger world. Your giving affirms our commitment to each other and to the community. Grateful hearts to receive these gifts. May they encourage us to live a life of integrity, compassion, and please look at the announcements in the order of service. The main announcement is that right after this service will be a very short, perhaps short, congregational meeting, both in person right here and via Zoom for the folks at home if we can load them in. We'll be discussing the very worrying current and recent past metrics for COVID in Mecklenburg, Iredell, and neighboring counties, and how to plan our Sunday services going forward. It's very hard to do because this is our first in-person service in more than 2 months. And we were hoping it would keep going from here, but things look uncertain. Zoom, is we use the Zoom link for the 11 o'clock chat down in the newsletter. It's the one that's the same every week. And if you're here in person, just stay and hang out. Our closing song today is number 121. Love the guys. Please stand as you are able to learn.
Excuse me, number 130.
131.
Love will guide us, Jesus guide us, hope inside us, lead the way on the road from free to liberty. Love will guide us through our life. If you can sing like angel, if you can love, sing for thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace will guide us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from free to liberty. Love will guide us through our life.
C.S. Eliot is the author of our closing words today. What we call a beginning is often the end. And to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. We shall not cease from exploration. And the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, of the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we return.